Some is due to fatigue, international trade fatigue. We're on the let's make trade boring again bandwagon with the NCBFAA. And now it's sliding somewhat into that area with the company's reaction being somewhat more mild and not as visceral as what we've seen before. Hello there. This is Cindy Allen from Trade Force Multiplier, and welcome to Simply Trade Cindy's version, where I choose a Taylor Swift song, one of Taylor's version song, and talk about international trade around that. So big news in the Taylor Swift world this week. She announced her 12th album, Life of a Showgirl. So in honor of that, I've tried to make my hair big, have show hair, but I live in the South where it's 90% humid, so it didn't work very well. But we look forward to Taylor's next era. And in honor of that, we're going to look at one of her other songs, Look at What You Made Me Do, which was a very popular song a few years ago. Everyone would know it, look at what you made me do. And I want to talk about that in terms of U.S. commerce. So I'm going to start off on something, the port fees. The USTR announced in a Federal Register earlier this year that they were assessing fees on all foreign-owned ships docking in the United States or companies that had owned foreign or Chinese-owned ships docking in the United States. So we know if you look at overall the steamship line, the only major carrier that's owned by China is OOCL. So OOCL handles quite a bit of traffic coming into the United States from the Trans-Pacific trade. And what we are seeing is OOCL is starting to announce that it will avoid U.S. ports, that it is completely revising their routing and will seek to dock U.S. goods in Canada or in Mexico. And then the importers will be responsible for the further on-shipment into the United States. We're seeing some other carriers starting to revise their routes as well. This takes place in October, so those carriers are planning now their routes for the fall and into the winter. We do see some major route changes happening. We have no idea how that's going to affect U.S. ports on the West Coast specifically, but we do expect there to be an impact. So stay tuned for continued news on that. In response to this, Trump has said that he may impose other fees, other transshipment fees. How he would do that is still a bit of a mystery, because if you dock something in British Columbia and you rail it down into the United States, it's considered a rail import. How would CBP know that this was coming via ship into British Columbia, and then what authority would that vest to assess additional transshipment fees? So this is an unfolding situation. There have been some ships that have been exempt, such as those handling U.S. chemicals, food supplies, very small types of ships that are coming into the U.S., such as stainless steel tankers, where there is no U.S. manufacturing in this area. So those have a little bit of a longer implementation schedule. But we do expect the majority of containerized traffic, which you and I deal with most of every day, to be impacted. Another look at what you made me do news, Canada has begun signing other trade agreements with other countries that specifically avoids the U.S. So not just a direct trade agreement with Mexico and other countries, but agreements that do allow for goods to come into Canada and then be rerouted around the U.S. to other markets. This is seen as very monumental for U.S. trade, but a good opportunity for those countries and those companies that want to avoid the U.S. for those tariffs and trade directly with other countries. Also, they have announced U.S. brand boycotts. We have already seen this hit alcohol with the earlier tariffs. Specifically the whiskey industry has been very heavily impacted, up to almost 10-digit percentage-based drops in sales, attributed directly to Canadian less Canadian consumption. Also, we saw some of the province actually withdraw or take off American-produced alcohol off of their shelves earlier in the year, and that continues. And the U.S. brands are not doing well in Canada overall. Canada has become a nation that is very aware of where the goods are being produced and are actively avoiding U.S. brands. Additionally, look at what you made me do for tourism. Tourism is down 33%. It's a $29 billion loss, according to Forbes, a recent article in Forbes. Tourism overall is down in the United States 9%, but specifically in Canada, 33% drop. I know many Canadians do come to Florida in the wintertime, so we do expect there to be a continued drop in U.S. tourism, but massive hit for the tourism industry so far, and they've directly attributed that to the tariffs and the situation, the geopolitical tensions that are being felt in the U.S. In other country, look at what you made me do news. India is now subject to a 50% tariff. This is a massive tariff that I think caught everyone by surprise. And we have seen that India has, like Canada, announced boycotts of U.S. brands. U.S. brands have a pretty strong foothold in India, and I've seen lots of news lately that has talked about how India is seeing the U.S. brands as less of a status symbol than they did 5 or 10 years ago, and that they will seek to fill that luxury market and the mid-tier market with products produced domestically in India or through other countries' produced goods. In China, look what you made me do news. China has quietly announced the cancellation of many agricultural contracts, specifically soybeans. Almost every soybean producer in the United States who had contracts with China has found them to be canceled. This is a huge impact for the agricultural products, the row crop products here in the heartland of America that are being produced, specifically because those products are already in the ground. Those production is, those goods are growing, and now farmers are scrambling suddenly to find a market for the sale of these soybeans, and we do expect that to continue with other products, specifically from China, but other heavy buying industries. We haven't seen the same impact on rice, which is also a huge export crop for the U.S., but stay tuned. We think that's coming next. Specifically in China, in 2016, when the Section 321 tariffs or the Section 301 tariffs were originally announced, there wasn't. It was a huge impact to China, that one they weren't necessarily prepared for, and China had no other alternatives. Well, since 2018, and specifically since 2020, China has begun pursuing buying goods from countries like Brazil for other crop producing areas, Argentina for beef, Brazil for the row crops. And they are more prepared now than they were in 2016 when the first Trump administration happened. So now that here we are in 2025, China has a much more diverse sourcing pattern and is able to fill the gaps with countries that they have established free trade agreements with or other trading agreements with that are beneficial for both countries. So again, what we're seeing wholesale is other countries are sort of bypassing the United States and taking their global trade opportunities elsewhere in response to some of these tariffs. Overall, on the farm news too, and I grew up in Indiana, so I have a, kind of a farming awareness, not a background, but a farming awareness. Farms are starting to feel the hit. Some of the farmers are starting to see that it's more difficult to get crop insurance because the underwriters are seeing this as a high-risk area. They have Again, less buyers overseas. And this is not just for China. I think other countries are watching China and taking their lead and saying, where else can we source our goods? Where else can we sell our goods? So it's going to impact the United States in a big way moving forward. Also, the cancellation of the USAID contracts. Many people are unaware that 30 to 40% of all crops produced in the United States actually went to food aid and were bought by the U.S. government. That cancellation of the U.S. aid happened early enough that many of the farmers could actively plan their crops in planting with that in mind. So we have less crops being planted, and usually subsidies would help cover that lack of income. However, as we saw in the first part of the administration, the farm subsidies were frozen in large part due to its linkage to the Biden administration Infrastructure Act, which increased farming subsidies a great degree. So that has been somewhat resolved, but again, that has led to the crop insurance challenges that we've had. So why am I talking about farm insurance and farm products on an international trade podcast? Simply Trade Cindy's version. It's because this is going to impact our pricing. It's going to impact the availability of products coming into the United States, not just selling. As the farmers are a huge export market, it's going to impact the freight forwarders who are handling those goods being shipped out. It's going to affect the ports. It's going to affect the availability of those containers. The more containers we have coming in and the less exports we have going out, it does create a container shortage in other areas of the world, which does create some impacts into the United States as well. So we do expect there to be a broad scale economic and operational impact for customs brokers, freight forwarders, ports, transportation companies overall. In the automotive side of look at what you made me do, we see a continued slide in profits due to the tariffs. GM announced their results, and we see a continued slide. The markets are starting to react to the automotive challenges that are happening due to the 232 tariffs, as well now as some of the inputs that these automotive industries have are going to be impacted by the recently announced increased reciprocal tariffs. We are continuing to wait and watch for the pharmaceutical 232 cases to be resolved and come out and be announced in the United States. One of the, I think, peculiar tariff assessments that we saw was Switzerland. Switzerland is at 39% reciprocal tariffs. And I think that caught both the Swiss government, it's by surprise, but it caught many of the industries in the United States that are doing business with Switzerland, and not just Swiss cheese. Their number one export to the United States is actually pharmaceuticals. So this is going to hurt the pharmaceutical industry. So a lot of those Swiss producers are now looking and waiting for the 232 tariffs to see if they're going to be lower. Most of the 232 tariffs are at 25% already. So is that going to be lower than the actual 39% from Switzerland? So I think we're seeing a big wait and see kind of response, where the earlier responses were, oh my gosh, what do I do? I'm panicking. I, have this huge hit. Let's do this. Let's change our supply chain. We're seeing a lot of the business executives mainly being influenced by trade professionals like you and I to take a wait and see approach. Okay, let's bring our goods in. We saw a lot of front loading before the August 1st deadline. We saw lots of front loading for products. And now that we're seeing the back to school goods are already here, most of Christmas is already here. Many companies are taking a kind of a wait and see approach. Let's wait and see what happens. Let's see if these turn around. Let's see how the market reacts. Let's see how our products are being imported and produced, and not rush to any type of action or judgment. So it's been a kind of a cautious response this time around, which I think Some is due to fatigue, international trade fatigue. We're on the let's make trade boring again bandwagon with the NCBFAA, and now it's sliding somewhat into that area with the company's reaction being somewhat more mild and not as visceral as what we've seen before. The last thing I want to touch on today is e-commerce. Big news in the e-commerce world, as I outlined before. August 29th is when all e-commerce ceases to be cleared by the de minimis. In May, that was eliminated for goods from China, so we've seen a huge impact. 75% of all de minimis goods came from China prior to May of 2025. And with the elimination of that, we did see Section 321 or de minimis products coming in from other countries increase, which concerned the U.S. government. And that was in many parts why August 29th, that deadline was moved up from the 2-year outline in the recently passed Big Beautiful Bill. But what we have seen is we haven't seen a massive drop in e-commerce shipments coming in. They're merely coming in and being cleared in different ways. Just remember, e-commerce is a way that people buy and sell things. It makes it easy. It makes it fast. It makes it clear. I don't have to go to a store. I can just browse in the evening, sitting on my couch, watching the latest Taylor Swift video, and I can just buy whatever I want. And if it costs a few dollars more, people are still buying. So we haven't seen a massive drop in e-commerce that was expected. But it has had an increase on pricing. Also, it's been a challenge for CBP. CBP in a Type 86, which is a de minimis type of clearance, got all of the information at a package level. They knew who produced it or sold it. They knew who it was going to. They knew what the product was. It was manifested at the package level coming into the United States. And that was mainly driven so that customs could ensure that the value didn't exceed $800. Well, now with the shift of e-commerce being cleared in a normal 01 or 11 environment, many of those shippers are actually consolidating their freight, and they have a U.S. company, so it's a shipper situation where the shipper sends it to a large U.S. company who then makes the entry, is the importer of record, and then they distribute that on a domestic basis. So CBP is not getting that lower level consignee information. And this has been a huge issue for CBP at a local level because they go from having information about every package to no information on all of that package level. So we do expect that CBP will continue to push to want to have that visibility. But right now it's kind of murky whether they have the authority to demand that, especially if a sale hasn't taken place yet to that end consumer. I mean, ultimately, goods are coming into the United States to be bought. Whether a big box retailer is bringing that in or it's coming from an e-commerce retailer, someone's going to buy that. It's when the sale happens and what the transaction sale looks like that's at issue here. So that's the wrap up on August 15th. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at Trade Force Multiplier or reach out to our partners at Simply Trade and the Global Trading Center. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.